Hello and welcome to the FatBOSS guide to Oregorger on both normal and heroic difficulty in the Blackrock Foundry.
Hello, and this encounter is pretty damn awesome.
It's really cool.
The first phase isn't too much to it, but the second phase involves him just like rolling around, and if you get caught by the rolls you get one hit, and it's all a little bit hectic.
It's pretty scary.
Yeah, but it's an awesome encounter, and it's probably the second boss you'll be working on, and to be honest, using this guide it shouldn't take that long.
Now for this encounter you do want to bring 2 tanks, 3 or 2 healers should be fine in 10 man, 5 to 6 healers in 30 man, and a mixture of DPS.
Now as much as we want to go on about phase 2 and talk about phase 2 first, to actually get to that phase you will need to do phase 1 first, sadly. And as you may have noticed, the boss does have an energy bar. Once this energy bar reaches 0, that is when phase 2 will start. However, you need to understand all the abilities that he does in phase 1 to actually get there. Now for the tanks to worry about, there's something called Acid Torrent. When the boss casts this, he'll spray a cone towards a ranged target, but it will deal physical damage to the closest target, so you could argue the first target that gets hit, if you want to look at it like that. And the closest target will also receive a debuff that increases the amount of damage that you take from this ability, and this stacks. You actually can taunt on one, although you don't technically taunt, you just need to make sure that one tank is closer than the other when this ability comes in. And all the ranged players that are hit from the acid will actually receive magic damage. However, this magic damage is reduced by the total damage mitigation that the tank has active when the ability first hits them. So to put it simply, the bigger damage reduction you have on yourself as a tank when this ability comes in, the less damage everyone else is going to take from it. And this is the only point in the entire fight really where you want to use cooldowns. If that means that you need to start stacking damage reductions even though they actually have returns, it's still worth doing it because you might as well. There's no other point in the fight where you'll be calling for sacks or iron barks or pain suppressions or barriers or anything like that. So just use literally everything you can because it just saves the healers having to heal it up. And one thing to note of this, shielding actually appears to work as well. So if you have a disc in your raid, get them to use Clarity of Will and just stack this up on top of you as well. And for the debuff it applies to you, just taunt on one. So just rotate which tank has it.
Now another thing that your tanks need to worry about, kind of, is an ability called Acid Maul. Now this is just a standard tank debuff, it just deals ticking damage to you. However, when you do taunt on the Acid Torrent, it generally gives you more than enough time to drop your Acid Maul stacks. Just make sure they don't go up to a ridiculous amount and you'll be absolutely fine. Now something for the rest of the range to worry about is an ability called Wretched Blackrock. Now the boss will spit a blob of acid at a ranged player's location and it will just leave a pool of horrible shit on the floor, and this will deal damage to anyone stood inside of it. What you need to do with this is just move out of it. It is very beneficial if you could stay stacked up as a group so you know exactly where it's going to land and then you just all move as one, and this also helps out with healing with the Acid Torrent because you're all benefiting from ground effects and all that kind of stuff. Make sure that when you are moving that you try and use the space as best you can because you haven't got a hell of a lot of room in these little tight corridors, so just fill up the space as best you can by hugging walls and all of that kind of stuff.
Now for your melee to worry about in this fight is something called Explosive Shard. When the boss throws this out, once it hits the melee it'll actually knock them back on impact, and then a couple of seconds later it'll explode. If you're hit by this explosion you take very high damage and you'll also be stunned, which is a right pain in the ass. Basically once you get hit by the impact, move the fuck away from it and let it time out, let it explode, and you'll be absolutely fine.
Now one last thing for, I kind of guess, the melee to worry about, but anyone who has an interrupt to worry about, is something called Blackrock Barrage. Now this is an interruptible cast that will do AoE damage to the raid, however the boss will spam this ability multiple times over a short period of time. So really what you need to do is assign really 3 interrupts so you can get each of the Blackrock barrages so it doesn't do AoE damage to the group. Do note though that the boss can kind of weave abilities into this, so you might do a Blackrock barrage and then he's like, I'm going to do an Acid Torrent right now, and you're ready, you're like, I'm number 2 interrupt, I'm going to interrupt the second cast. I just try to interrupt an Acid Torrent. I'm a fucking idiot. So yeah. If you do fuck up and do that, then just call out for another interrupt, but do make sure that you know exactly what you're interrupting.
Now once you manage to deal with all those abilities and the boss's energy is completely depleted, you'll now enter phase 2, and this is where things actually start to get fun. So at this point the boss can no longer be tanked and will just start to roll around the room. If you are hit by this roll, you'll almost certainly be one shot, if not you'll be very, very close to dead. So the whole point of this phase is just to avoid the roll. However, to get the boss back into phase 1, you need to destroy crates that spawn in almost every single corridor in the room that contain ore, and when the boss rolls over the top of the ore, he'll eat it, get his energy back. Once his energy is at 100%, boom, you're back into phase 1. Now, every time he rolls down one of these corridor paths, he'll end his roll by smashing into set locations, and these set locations are the same on every single pull. When he smashes into these locations, he'll be temporarily stunned and do a burst of AoE damage to the raid. And this amount of damage actually increases as this phase goes on, so you can't stay in this phase forever, otherwise eventually one of his smashes will just one-hit you. Now, when the boss is rolling, he'll always try to roll in a corridor that has the most ore on the ground, and you can actually use this to your advantage and dictate where you want the boss to move. And for that kind of tactic, you'd usually run around as a single group or 2 split groups. We did actually try multiple different ways of doing this boss, and that was one of the ways we tried. However, for us to sit here and tell you exactly where you should go and how you should do it with that sort of tactic is a really bad idea, because the speed in which you guys kill boxes is going to be completely different to how one of our raids killed the boxes.
Or how any other guild has killed boxes by that matter. So really, this strat does work, it's absolutely fine, but we can't sit here and say, go down this corridor and turn right, because that shit just ain't going to work.
That is basically something that you're just going to have to work out yourself. However, the strategy that we found the best on this first heroic week was almost certainly just following the boss. This tactic, pretty much nothing can go wrong. All it does is just means that phase 2 lasts slightly longer than other tactics, but is extremely safe and controlled, providing your healers can cope with it.
Now, the reason that it is safe is that the boss can never actually roll back on himself. When he gets to one of these crossroads, he does look like he has 3 possible directions, but he only actually has 2 because, as we said, he can't roll back on himself. So if you're always following him and you're always where he's just come from, you know he ain't going to come to you anytime soon. Now, there are a couple of problems with this strategy. It is a very, very simple one, so everyone can understand it, and it's very unlikely that you're going to fuck it up. But the phase will last longer because you are kind of waiting for the boss to roll down corridor that he's already rolled down. That means that there is going to be slightly more healing for the healers to do. However, you are grouped up most of the time, so the damage that is going out on the group, especially on normal and heroic mode, is nothing really for you to worry about.
And really, you don't need to use any cooldowns in phase 1, especially if you reduce the amount of damage Acid Torrent does by a ridiculous amount by using really, really crazy cooldowns on the tanks. So you could even save cooldowns for this phase if you really wanted to, if it was going on for too long.
Now, at a certain point through this, the boss will probably go down a really long corridor, a set of really long corridors, and it'll be a right pain in the ass to following. So we kind of did the follow the boss strat, and then when he went all the way to China, we was like, oh, fuck this, I can't
You might as well just
anymore.
let him get on with it.
Yeah, we just let him get on with it. He was rolling all over the place while we was just clearing out the rest of the room of boxes, and that was absolutely fine. Just make sure you know where the boss is, keep an eye on him, because you don't want to be caught off guard and die to one of his rolls.
Now, once the boss has rolled over enough of these ores, he will then, of course, get all his energy back, and then you go back into phase 1, and you just repeat the fight from this point. Now, you should only get phase 2 twice. I mean, it's possible to kill the boss by only getting one of the phase 2s. If you can do that, then brilliant, your DPS is awesome. But ultimately, you should never get that third phase 2. So keep that in mind when you are doing this, and any ores that you did in the first phase 2 should still be up for the second phase 2. So the second phase 2 should always be a lot quicker than the first one. But that's all there is to this boss. If this guide did help you out, then please do drop us down a like. Helps us out a shit ton. And if you would like to see any of our other Blackrock Foundry guides, please do click up on the annotations you see on your screen now, and it'll take you straight to that video.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching.